is Brittany Alisea, and my project is on the break-even load factor. My problem statement was that the report will analyze the passenger yield and CASM for the airlines in different subcategories to determine their success and offer a strategy to increase their revenues, the categories being full-service carriers and low-service carriers. My analysis was that based on the research, I came to the conclusion that there's a direct correlation between yield and cost per available seat mile. After comparing the data between the two different types of carriers, I found that higher yield values with low corresponding cost per available seat mile resulted in lower break-even factor, which is what you want. The evidence also supported my original hypothesis that FSNCs have higher operating costs than LCCs, which put them at a disadvantage and raised their break-even load factor. LCCs have an advantage, however, because of their business framework. Majority of them only use one type of aircraft. For example, Spirit uses just the Airbuses, like A320s. My data comparison worksheet, I have charts that compare the data between American, United, and Southwest. We will see that soon. But I came to the conclusion with the data that both American and United Airlines have high break-even load factors, which leads to the conclusions that FSNCs have higher costs and we need to fill the plane at almost capacity to earn revenue. On the other hand, though, Southwest had a lower break-even load factor, meaning the airline gains more revenue from each flight. I also found out both American and United have high CASM that is close to their RASM, meaning that their costs are close to their revenue, which is not good, as well as their load factor being under their break-even load factor, meaning they're not filling the plane to the point where they match. I also concluded from this data that larger FSNCs are not performing efficiently, and which is causing them to lose their revenues. Southwest, though, is dominating the industry with having low CASM and low break-even load factor percentages, which means that they're making more profit on each flight. Potential recommendations I have for FSNCs, such as American and United, would be to cut expenses, increase passenger yield, and develop a balance between their load factor. Aviation revenue management is very tricky. The airlines will need to reorganize their flight seating, in my recommendation, and also develop packages to increase their overall yield and revenues. What I mean by this is that a flight is sectioned off by class. You have first class, business, or economy. Each airline has their different setup, but if you distribute the right amount of seats for each class, it can easily increase your passenger yield as well as your load factor. You don't want prices too low in a full plane because your yield is decreased, and you don't want prices too high and no one to board the plane because then your load factor is too low. I also recommend having ancillary revenues such as frequent flyer programs, credit card deals, concessions. Ancillary revenues like this, such as baggage claim, are very good because there's not tax on it and it's extra revenue you're getting besides the flight, which is very crucial. I have my source of data listed here. And next I have my glossary. I thought it was really important to include this because I am using terms that some people may or may not know. I included the description as well as the math to get it. Tables, I wanted to do quarterly reports for 2016 through 2019, and the first one that you see is American Airlines. The ASM, CASM, RASM, yield, load factor, and break-even load factor numbers put in, and on the bottom I did include the averages because I compared it at the end altogether. My next worksheet is all my charts for American Airlines. Chart 1 shows the growth of the yield from first quarter 2016 to last quarter 2019, and it also has a trend line so you could follow through with that. Chart 2 is the load factor compared to break-even load factor, meaning how much are they filling per flight for quarter, and their break-even load factor to match revenue with cost. Chart 3 is cost compared to revenue per available seat mile, and as you could tell in the chart, the numbers are very close, and you don't want that. You want your revenue to be much higher than your cost. Our next airline is United Airlines, and then again, I still have the same reports listed for ASM, CASM, RASM, yield, load factor, and break-even load factor, and the averages in the bottom. And from the last one, American Airlines, you can see that their averages are very similar, And this makes sense because they're both FSNCs. In our UA worksheet for chart 4, we have again the yield growth over the period from first quarter 2016 to last quarter 2019. And you could tell compared to the last one, this one is a little bit more put together. It's not much of a big difference as the last one. And we also have that trend line, which the numbers are a little bit more closer. For chart 5, we have the load factor compared to break-even load factor. And again, this one for United, they're doing a little bit better than American, but still their numbers are very similar. For chart 6, we have cost compared to revenue per available seat mile. And again, for the FSNCs, the numbers are very close, which we do not want. But I do give it to United Airlines in their chart 5. They do have points where their load factor met their break-even load factor. For Southwest Airlines, one of my favorite, I did the same thing in the table, compared the ASM, RASM, CASM yield load factor and break-even load factor from first quarter 2016 to last quarter 2019. And as you can see from the bottom averages, Southwest Airlines is doing much better. Their break-even load factor is 76.8%. For chart 7 for yield for Southwest, we can see lower yield, but it does begin to rise once it hits 2018, like the second quarter, and then it does stay persistent and then rise again, which is good compared to their cost. For chart 8, we see the load factor compared to the break-even load factor, and as you can see clearly, they meet their break-even load factor in every quarter, which is something airlines should want to meet. This is a good example of an efficient airline. For chart 9, we have cost compared to revenue per available seat mile, and it's clear as night and day that Southwest is doing much better than their competitors. The gap between their cost and revenue is much larger than United and American, and this is what you want to see. You want your revenue per available seat mile to be much higher than your cost per available seat mile. So Southwest is really dominating right now, and it is a low-cost carrier. Now for the data comparison, where we put all the factors together to really see how much Southwest is dominating over American and United if FSNC's competitors. For chart 10, we have the break-even load factor comparison for each one in each quarter. And as you could clearly see, Southwest has a much lower break-even load factor for each quarter. American does slightly better than United in certain quarters, but they're pretty much on the same playing field. In chart 11, we have the average CASM in yield with break-even load factor. Now, this is a combo chart comparing all three. We have average yield in blue, average CASM in orange, which you can see for each airline, and Southwest is doing much better with that ratio. And then in gray, we have the average break-even load factor, and you could see how the slope drastically declines for Southwest, and that's what you want. You want a low break-even load factor, because once you can match that point, the rest of your load factor, the rest of the seats on the airplane is pure revenue, and that's what you want to see. Chart 13, I have the averages for the yield, CASM, RASM, load, and break-even load factor, so you can see the overall averages from first quarter 2016 to last quarter 2019 a little bit more clearly. If you look down at the break-even load factor, you can see that American and United both have it around 84, while Southwest is at 76%. Now, this is the whole point of the project, to determine and use the data to see how FSNCs differ than LCCs, and this is clear that LCCs are really benefiting. Now, using this data that I found here, I could clearly understand why FSNCs are struggling now during COVID and why LCCs are still pushing through. Before, FSNCs like American, Delta, and United were the top 3 and leading, but now we have LCCs such as Southwest and Spirit that are taking over and are still able to manage through the COVID. In conclusion, FSNCs such as American and United Airlines do need to cut costs and develop new strategies for revenue management in order to boost their yield and increase their revenues and match their break-even load factor. They could do this by incorporating ancillary revenues or restructuring their flight seating plans.